I'm Bel Bare. This is Sacred Mechanics.
Great to have you here, and a very special welcome to anyone brand new to the show. The show itself is fairly new as well. So I'm really stoked that you're here to come on this ride with me of exploring spirituality, shamanic work, spiritual awakening, little tips and tools, and also more deep dives into certain esoteric subjects, which is what we're doing today. You may have heard in previous episodes, I'm really fascinated by the concept of the Chimera. I have often had these feelings, visions, and experiences that I have two souls or identities in one body, which sounds really whack. Roll with me on this and let's have a look at how this has come up historically and where to take this new info. Have you ever wondered what it would mean to carry more than one soul inside you, not metaphorically, but truly two intelligences inhabiting one vessel? Mystics like Meister Eckhart and Teresa of Avila wrote of the dual indwelling, the human soul and the divine soul existing simultaneously within one being. Here the two souls express the meeting point of human imperfection and divine perfection, and it's a mystical union. Today's podcast theme is something I've pondered for over 20 years, and no matter how deep I dig, I don't have the answers I crave. I have to look inward for those. But for this episode, I'll share with you a slice of the worldview with a dash of my own ideas. Introducing the spiritual chimera, a being that is both plural and singular. Chimera is a term we inherit from ancient myth, so let's begin with the mythic origin, the first chimera. In Homer's Iliad, I'll just quote here, the chimera, an invincible, inhuman monster, but divine in origin. Its front part was a lion, its rear a snake's tail, and in between a goat. She breathed deadly rage in searing fire. In Greek mythology, the chimera, meaning she-goat, was a fire-breathing hybrid creature, usually depicted with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent. You may have seen Victorian-style illustrations of this beast. She was said to be the child of Typhon and Echidna, monstrous beings themselves, and a sibling of Cerberus and Hydra. The hero Bellerophon in Homer's Iliad, with the aid of Pegasus, eventually slew her. But myth is never merely story. You need to look beneath the words, perhaps for the architecture of consciousness in this case. The Greeks were mapping the psyche. The chimera's monstrous composition symbolized the uncontrollable mixture of drives within humans: instinct, the lion; desire and fertility, the goat; and cunning or venomous shadow, the serpent. To face a chimera was to confront one's own amalgamated nature. If we translate myth into meaning, breaking down the symbolism here, in a spiritual context, we can identify that the lion represents power and ego, but it can also symbolize strength and pride when I reflect upon how the lion is used in the Rider-Waite tarot deck. Then we have the goat, which is a favorite for lust, appetite, and instinct. Also back to tarot, it can also represent the devil. And I'd like to also add here that fertility is a concept we can't let go of with the goat too. Also in Norse mythology, this idea of regeneration, which is really important in the context of the soul's makeup. Thor's chariot is drawn by two magic goats that can be cooked and eaten again and again. And then we come to the serpent, hidden wisdom or venomous shadow. And in my understanding, healing as she sheds her skin, renewal. I'd like to add here that some books reference the tail as a dragon's tail, which energetically for me feels nothing like a serpent or snake. The dragon brings a whole new energy, which sort of puts a skew on the meaning a bit. I found the dragon's tail interpretation in an older mythology dictionary, but I found the Homer Iliad interpretation online in a more modern context, suggesting that it's a serpent in that translation. So together they symbolize the inner fusion of drives, the many selves in each of us. And if we look beneath the tail, the chimera becomes less a monster and more a mirror. Is it a mirror of ourself and how we're constructed, or is it a mirror of our shadow, this inner conflict that every human being has? They either are able to observe it or endure it if it's really extreme, or some people have mastered it and just ride all of these personalities and drives with complete confidence and seem to override these inner urges quite easily. Were the ancient Greek storytellers describing what it feels like to be human, and were able to articulate it in, I guess, personifying it with this chimera beast. I love anything that takes these larger concepts and puts them in a picture or an image or a being of some sort. I really love symbolism and putting things into this more visual context that we can imagine in our mind's eye for ourselves in our own unique ways. In alchemy, the chimera stands for composite consciousness, the merging of disparate energies into a single form. So alchemists use hybrid beasts as metaphors, the sacred union of opposites. So in my understanding, the chimera can represent both the chaos before transmutation and the creative fusion that follows it. If we are shown a chimera in a dream, meditation or vision, could it be a sign of conflicting aspects of ourself? Conflicts like spiritual and mental, or rational and intuitive, or masculine and feminine. And are these aspects seeking integration if they keep coming up for us? We all know that there's a danger that lies in repression when we subconsciously deny one part and it erupts as the so-called monster, because there's only so long we can contain these sort of things, and we know this through the trials and tribulations of life and these inner turmoils that bubble under the surface. So there's a point where if we expend all our energy to contain things, this is when disease comes up, or fragments in our outer world as a reflection of our inner world. It's a bit, maybe it culminates into this concept of as above, so below. When we accept it, the chimera transforms from deep inner conflict to a symbol of mastery over our inner complexities. And this leads me to an area where I'll touch on ideas much closer to home for me in esoteric traditions, especially Hermeticism and Theosophy. The chimera also becomes a cipher for spiritual distortion. Elena Blavatsky used the term chimerical to describe the illusions born of the lower mind, false gods, projections, and glamour in the occult sense. Here, the chimera is not a real being, but an astral construct, a thought form so charged with emotion that it gains energetic shape, which comes with its own backlog of consequences and manifestations. And it's such a huge subject that could blossom out of this idea, but I'm not going to deep dive here, as tempting as it is, but I'll add that this connects with Tibetan tulpas, collective energetic entities created by human attention. This sounds like something that aligns with the law of attraction, which we do as a collective, and it also reminds me of some of the content in The Eternal News by J.J. Brown, which looks very deeply into thought as matter. It was the book that inspired The Science of Getting Rich, which inspired The Secret. And if you go to fawn.com, you can learn a bit more about the story of that book. It's very rare. It's only in print from fawn.com. And if you really love to pull the thread on that sort of thing, and you also don't mind a bit of scientific thinking being folded into spiritual thinking, it's a really interesting and slightly challenging book to get through, since it's written in 1889 and I believe it's been written by a scientist. Undercover, of course. Okay, so the chimera could represent an energy body formed from psychic fragmentation or collective shadow. A cautionary tale about the monsters we co-create through fear or obsession. And I think we're living in times right now that are a perfect illustration of this. And not in a good way. Okay, I want to get into the really juicy stuff now. Has anyone ever claimed to literally house two souls besides me? It's definitely come up, and Hermetic alchemists use the phrase Anima Duplex, the double soul, across indigenous and shamanic traditions. There are echoes of two-soul motifs. Among many First Nation and Siberian shamans, it's believed that a shaman is born with more than one soul, one that remains tethered to the body and another that can travel to spirit realms. In Celtic shamanism, a person might seem to have an anam, a soul of personality, and an anamwa, meaning a great soul or oversoul, sometimes experienced as a separate entity during trance or initiation. And I can really relate to this, and I can't tell you how thrilled I was to read about this when researching for this episode. It was definitely a feeling of coming home, because I've really had no one to share this with before, and it's sort of an odd thing to raise in spirituality. You don't hear it very much, but it's making sense as I've finally, in my path, reached the understanding that of all the modalities I've trained and this and that, it's ultimately led to this shamanic description of my tools, experiences, and abilities in the spiritual realm. So yes, two souls, perfect. This is actually equipment I need, apparently, for the work that I do. So I'm much more comfortable with it now. So the second soul may not be foreign at all. It might be part of ourselves that we've exiled. And on the other hand, from a shamanic perspective, for those of us called for this work, the shaman's power comes from learning to navigate the traffic between worlds, and having two souls perhaps creates an energetic doorway, guarded or fortified by this duality somehow. It feels like a safety net to me when I'm working. Yeah, it does feel like a safety net, and it's like the energy or the tension between the two souls is like the energetic trampoline almost. I'm not sure how to describe it in actual words. Anyway, I'll leave that. Let's touch on reincarnation and modern metaphysics for a moment. Some Eastern and modern metaphysical schools speak of walk-ins, a New Age concept that appeared in the 1970s. It describes one soul leaving a body, usually after trauma or near death. And I've also heard of this with people having a bad drug trip and other things. And if you've had similar experiences, I would love to hear from you. Anyway, so one soul leaves the body and another, more advanced soul enters to continue the life. Sometimes both are said to briefly coexist during the transition. And I know too, sometimes souls just aren't coping with the body. They're not dealing and they want out. And another soul is organized to take over that body, which sounds like a zombie film, but I'm not wanting to use harsh words in that way, that it's that basic and simple. But a new soul integrates into the human experience to relieve the other soul that's really not dealing with the heaviness of materiality and physicality on this plane. Similarly, in Tibetan Buddhism, advanced lamas may consciously project a portion of their consciousness into another body, a process akin to soul sharing. And in certain past life regression narratives, clients describe feeling overlaid, carrying residues or fragments of multiple incarnations active at once. And I just want to touch on channeling here. I don't think channeling is anything to do with Chimera. Channeling is what it says, where you're allowing another non-physical being or entity, or whatever language you'd like to use, to speak through and have access to our privileged position of a physical body, to be able to communicate to others, to write, think, speak, and articulate things. It's an important part of spiritual teaching, obviously, and many of us have moments where we just know information and guidance is coming through a sort of an informal channeled source and I think a lot of people experience this, where they find that they're telling someone exactly what they need to hear, and it feels so natural, the flow and the information. They don't know where it's coming from. They just open up and let those words spill out. And it's usually the most beautiful thing. All these stories are pointing to our inner multiplicity as well. So we've got these souls or energies coming in, but there's also this more complicated context within us. Where do you feel divided inside yourself? Is there a voice within you that feels foreign but wise? Can you hold both without choosing one over the other? This is a big question for me. I work hard to try and merge both so I can exist in a normal society and function. It's a lot of work, and I'm at my happiest when I'm one or the other and not trying to blend both. But here I am blending both, doing this work actually. And perhaps it's the greatest challenge that's been presented to me for this life, is to be this willow white raven and this Bel Bare. Some of you that know me, I worked as willow white raven and was trained as willow white raven as a name given to me during my spirit training. And my birth name is Bel Bare. So in very recent times, like the last 12 months, I've just started calling myself Bel Bare while doing Willow's work. So there's always this weird disconnect, and I'm working to sort of simplify my life and have a presentation of one personality. But actually, when I'm doing all the different kinds of work that I do, there is definitely there's a polarity of the energy, which is my secret sauce. How about you? Let me know if you know exactly what I mean, if you feel like there's a few things going on, and do you struggle with aligning them, or do you let each have its own voice? The Chimera teaches us that the soul is not singular in the sense of how it is constructed, and perhaps it is an energetic ecosystem. Spiritual growth and the path to contentment, or getting in the flow, is the art of harmony between all these forces that ignite your spirit. Our inner polarity needs acknowledgement as part of the process of spiritual unfurlment. I love that word, unfurl. It is so visual to me and explains so much about what happens to us as we awaken spiritually. I think unfoldment is used a lot as well. I think there's a book I have called Spiritual Unfoldment. It's very beautiful. maybe there aren't two souls in one body, but maybe every soul is already a crowd. This is a really interesting concept. I'm not sure if I believe it to be true, but I'm throwing the concept out there. Are we made up of a sacred collage of all we've been and all we will become? I would say that science and biology would say, yeah, this is how genetics work. And I'm just wondering spiritually if we built the same or not. I just feel like maybe our souls are cleaner than that, with coming in pure and clean without all this other stuff, but maybe not. But maybe it's a magical mix between the atomic structure of our physiology in our body combined with the energy of our souls that gives this fingerprint or this blueprint for us to work with. Oh, that seemed a lot, like quite a few things there. And I really hope you found it interesting and maybe activated some things within you, some realizations, or has inspired you to look into your own areas here of doing some deep dives and getting into the books. I always talk about hitting the books and using books because I don't find that all the information on the internet is the best way to learn. It's not bad, but it's also good to double check things and cross-reference and printed, published books, preferably before the internet. Preferably before the 90s. The old stuff is the good stuff, and then we can build upon it and cross-check and reference more modern scientific understanding and breakthroughs with things, and just build a world of knowledge for yourself that suits you and to follow information that you feel drawn to. And if you're new to the spiritual path, I'm so happy you're here. What an exciting time for you. You can learn more about me and what kind of work I do on my website, sacredmechanics.com. And while you're there, you'll see Begin Again, a 10-day self-paced course I designed to help you clear mental fog, realign your energy, and reconnect with your own inner direction. I've set it up so that you have bite-sized video lessons you can play anytime, simple rituals, guided meditations, and reflective journaling. You'll build lasting momentum to help you go inward, get clear, and move forward with purpose. And you'll see that it's really inexpensive at the moment. It's just $44 Australian for the course, and you can use it again and again and again. You're just one small step away from your fresh start. So check out Begin Again. Thanks, everyone. I'm really enjoying getting this information out to you, and I'm hearing back from some of you about how this has impacted you, and it's raising questions as well as discussion and conversation, and that's what this is all about. So I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening. I'm Bel Bare, and this is Sacred Mechanics.